Welcome to Tech Talks with Kinsoft. Today, we're looking at a year that was, well, a brutal turning point for Australian higher education, 2025.
It really was. We saw this sustained digital siege where the attack shifted. It became less about just stealing money and more about a calculated campaign of psychological warfare.
And it was aimed directly at students and alumni.
That's the critical shift we saw. And Western Sydney University, or WSU, really became the ultimate case study. We've got a stack of sources here detailing a year-long series of incidents, but, none were as dramatically malicious as what happened on October 6th and 7th, 2025.
Let's just unpack the sheer shock of that moment. Imagine you, our listener. You're a busy professional, maybe a current student. You check your personal inbox, not your Uniportal, and there's an official-looking email.
Yeah.
And it claims, with no warning, that your degree has been revoked
Mm-hmm.
and you are permanently excluded from the university.
The panic was just instant. We heard from a WSU student who said they felt their entire life and a decade of hard work was down the drain.
A decade of work.
But then think about the alumni. The sources highlight people who graduated 15 years ago. Their professional registration, their entire job, depends on that degree. And suddenly they're wondering if their whole career foundation just vanished.
And what's so fascinating here, so disturbing, is the motivation. The WSU Vice Chancellor confirmed it. The whole point of this scam was purely to harm our students and alumni, just to damage the university's reputation.
Right. There was no follow-up asking for ransom, no link saying, pay us to get your degree back. Nothing. It was just emotional collateral damage, targeted destruction.
It just raises the question, why go to all that effort just for reputational harm?
Because it's incredibly effective. Psychological warfare is, from an attacker's perspective, very resource efficient. You get maximum damage, panic, erosion of public trust for a minimal technical cost, especially if you're using data that was, already stolen in a previous attack.
Okay, so let's analyze how this email attack was pulled off so effectively. It wasn't just mass spam. It was frighteningly convincing.
It was. And they succeeded because of the personalization. The emails had personal identifiers that proved the attacker had deep access. They used the recipient's full name and, this is the critical part, their unique student number.
Right. If an email has a fact that only your university should know, your guard just drops instantly.
Instantly. And the second layer of credibility was the delivery method itself. It wasn't coming from some, typo-riddled Hotmail address.
No, it looked real.
It was real, in a sense. The attackers used the university's own infrastructure. The emails came from a legitimate, verified WSU address, something like noemail@westernsydney.edu.au. They got into an internal automatic email generator and just fed it the stolen student data.
Wow. So they weaponized the university's own communication system against its community. But the story gets even stranger, because there was a second mass email right after.
That's the intriguing twist. This next email, on October 7th, came from the university's parking permits account, and it was actively criticizing WSU. The center claimed they used the exact same vulnerability and alleged the university had known about these security weaknesses since 2017.
So it was almost like a protest hack, trying to publicly expose the security failures.
It was definitely framed that way. The message claimed the flaws were, and I'm quoting here, easily exploited with just a few clicks. It just reinforced this idea that WSU's systems were fundamentally broken.
Now, WSU, to their credit, did respond quickly. They came out and said it was fraudulent, that everyone's awards were safe, and their immediate step was to just shut that email generator down.
Which, they said, prevented many thousands of additional emails from being sent. And they immediately called in the NSW Police Cybercrime Squad. But to really get how they could personalize those messages, we have to look backwards. This was all built on a treasure trove of data stolen earlier in the year.
And this is where the supply chain risk just comes into sharp, painful focus. The scam emails were only possible because of a much bigger theft that WSU was already dealing with.
Precisely. We need to rewind a bit to a massive, protracted breach between June 19th and September 3rd, 2025. The target then was WSU's student management system.
And crucially, that system wasn't even managed by WSU directly.
No, and that complicated things hugely. It's the definition of a supply chain nightmare. The student management system was hosted by a third-party provider on a commercial cloud platform, but the sources suggest the attackers didn't even breach that third party directly. They got in via further external systems.
So we're talking about a fourth, maybe even a fifth-party vendor.
Exactly. An attacker exploits a vulnerability in a contractor who works for a vendor who runs a system for the university. It makes tracing the origin exponentially harder, right?
Absolutely. The vulnerability could have been anything. An unpatched API, compromised credentials from a small maintenance firm, and that let them just waltz past WSU's own defenses and get to the crown jewels.
And when you look at the list of what data was compromised, the alarm bell should be screaming for everyone listening. This wasn't just names and email addresses.
No.
No, this was data that enables complete identity theft. We're talking tax file numbers, TFNs, bank account details, driver license and passport details, visa information.
That's permanent identity collateral. You can't just cancel your TFN like a credit card.
Exactly. And it wasn't just financial. They got health and disability information, ethnicity data, employment, and payroll details. They didn't just grab a student directory, they grabbed entire life files, perfect for the most sophisticated fraud.
So it's clear this was the ammunition for the October attack. But you said WSU's vice chancellor described them as being under repeated attack. So this June to September breach was just one chapter in a much longer story.
It was a continuous battle all through 2025. We know that earlier in the year, around Jan and Feb, there was another breach. That one hit about 10,000 students through this single sign-on system.
And then there was that high-profile arrest in June.
Yes, on June 25th, police arrested a former student, Kira Kingston, and charged her with over 20 cybercrimes against WSU. But here's the key detail. WSU confirmed that the attacks continued even after she was arrested.
And that's critical. It proves WSU wasn't just fighting one disgruntled student. They were up against multiple distinct professional threat actors. Probably large-scale organized crime.
It's the only conclusion that makes sense. And WSU, well, they weren't alone in 2025. This was a systemic crisis hitting the entire Australian education sector.
The stats really back that up. The education sector reported 44 notifiable data breaches in just the first half of 2024, and it just got worse from there. Let's look at a couple of other cases.
Sure. First, in January 2025, the University of Notre Dame, Australia was hit. They were a victim of the FOG ransomware group. And what's interesting about FOG is their speed. They specialize in exploiting things like compromised VPN credentials, and they can go from getting in to encrypting everything in, well, sometimes under 2 hours.
2 hours. That leaves you basically zero time to detect or respond. What was the impact there?
It was immediate. They stole TFNs and medical documents. But operationally, students reported weeks of disruption. They couldn't get their timetables, couldn't access portals right before the semester started. A crippling blow.
Now, contrast that with the Albright Institute of Language and Business in February. This shows that being small doesn't keep you safe.
Correct. Albright, a smaller private institution, was targeted by KillSec ransomware. And KillSec is important because they operate as ransomware as a service, or RAY.
Can you just quickly define RAYs for our listeners?
Yeah, think of it like a franchise model for cybercrime. A group like KillSec builds the nasty ransomware tools, the infrastructure, the payment portals, and then they lease access to affiliates who are other criminals that actually carry out the attacks. It just massively lowers the barrier to entry.
And the data they went after at Albright really shows the vulnerability of institutions that have a lot of international students.
Absolutely. The data KillSec published included passport scans, visa application documents, incredibly sensitive immigration files. That information is uniquely valuable for organized crime.
So this brings us back to that core question.
Yeah.
Why? Why is the Australian education sector such a huge target?
It's really a perfect storm of 4 factors. First, the sheer volume of high-value personal data, like we discussed, TFNs, health info, passports. Second is the lure of intellectual property. I mean, universities are doing cutting-edge research, defense, health, tech, prime targets for state-sponsored espionage.
And the third factor is just the complexity of their networks.
Exactly. They run these sprawling, complex IT environments for tens of thousands of users. Students, staff, researchers, alumni, all connecting with different devices. It creates a massive attack surface. And fourth, as the WSU case proved, that critical reliance on third-party vendors.
The supply chain.
The supply chain. Securing your own perimeter is only half the battle.
So given these persistent, sophisticated attacks, what are the universities doing to fight back? This can't be cheap.
Oh, it is astronomically expensive. WSU's vice chancellor said they spent $26 million on cyber uplift in 2025 alone, and they budgeted a similar amount for 2026. That includes hiring top-tier external consultants, complete security governance reviews.
$26 million. That's a staggering investment. Is it even realistic for a smaller place like the Albright Institute to meet that kind of budget? Or are they just fundamentally left vulnerable.
That is the big strategic challenge for the whole sector.
Yeah.
But WSU's investment does give us a useful blueprint. We can look at the specific security uplifts they talked about in their public notifications.
So what were the practical changes they made?
A heavy focus on identity and access management, so a massive forced reset of system credentials and access tokens across the board. They also brought in stronger authentication requirements and, crucially, much stricter controls over privileged accounts.
Which is just limiting who has the keys to the kingdom.
Exactly. They also moved heavily into preparedness, running response simulations, and really focusing on proactive supply chain cyber reviews, not just waiting for a vendor to tell them there's a problem. And they implemented 247 monitoring and new threat intelligence capabilities so they can hunt for threats instead of just reacting to them.
That shift from reactive to proactive is key. But as you said, individual listeners also have to take action, especially if their data might be out there.
Absolutely. The direct advice here is non-negotiable. First, change your passwords immediately, and we need to move past the 8-character minimum. Aim for 15 or more, a mix of letters, numbers, and symbols, and please do not reuse passwords across different accounts.
Basic password hygiene. What's number 2?
Multi-factor authentication, MFA. Set it up everywhere you can. Your email, your banking, your social media means an attacker needs both your password and your phone. It just makes it so much harder for them.
And for anyone who is directly affected by the WSU breach, there are still specialized resources to help.
That's right. WSU is still engaged with ID Care, which is Australia's National Identity and Cyber Support Service. If you need help, you can contact them with the referral code WSUDB25. The university also kept a dedicated phone line open, which is 02-9174-6942.
This whole saga from 2025 really demonstrates that cybersecurity has to be treated as, well, maybe the single most critical institutional risk. The attackers, whether it's RASIS groups like KillSec and FOG or someone else, are persistent, professional, and they're exploiting these complex supply chains.
The WSU incident just makes it crystal clear. Securing your supply chain, those third and fourth party vendors, it's not a compliance checkbox anymore. It's the primary way these advanced attacks are happening. If you can't vet your vendors, your whole system is compromised.
The scale of it all suggests a fundamental reckoning is underway for the whole sector.
I think so. The question for Australian universities is no longer if they'll be attacked. It's whether they have the sustained financial commitment, the sophisticated governance, the actual resources to defend against these evolving threats for the long haul.
That's a powerful point to end on. It's about sustained commitment, not just crisis response. And if this discussion has raised concerns for you about your own organization's vulnerabilities or its third-party risk management,
we'd encourage you to take that next step. You can go to www.kinsoft.com.au to discuss your security and IT needs with a team that understands this landscape.
Thank you for joining us for Tech Talks with Kinsoft. We'll be back soon with another exploration into the world of technology and security.